This is Dr. Damaris G, Integrated Family Nurse Practitioner, going over my 50-page genetic report. And I know part of this may be a little boring, but let me tell you, when you understand what your genes are and your personalized map, you may realize that you have the opportunity to change some of those parts of your genes. Just because your genes, your genetic makeup may say one thing does not mean that those genes are going to be turned on or going to be expressed. We have the opportunity in our life to manage a trigger or manage the expression of a gene by our habits, our lifestyle, and the things that we do. So I first want to say that how did I get my genetic map and how was I able to find this? So first off, I did 23andMe and I also did an Ancestry report, Ancestry.com. I used 23andMe to do this to get the raw data. I did the 23andMe plus health. And then what I did was I got the raw data. I'm going to have all links below so that you are able to get your own genetic map and look up what your genes mean. The second thing I did, which I want to shout out to Dr. Rhonda Patrick from Found My Fitness, I used her website and uploaded my raw data into her Found My Fitness website. She is an expert geneticist and PhD. She has a profound amount of knowledge in the genetic markers and what it represents and expresses. So what I did was I paid for my 23andMe around $99. I am not in any way sponsored by either one of these people. I just would like to say that it was a really very informative. And as you see, as I read my genetic report, it may seem a little boring, but what I'd like you to get out of it, even if one part you get, is that your genes give you information to then change. So some of these markers may seem like, oh no, I have this in my family, I'm not going to change it, but I do. So I took the 23andMe, I paid the $100, maybe it was $199, I'm not sure, with the plus health, and then I got the raw data. I downloaded my raw data. I then went to Found My Fitness, Dr. Rhonda Patrick's website. I uploaded my raw data and she did a comprehensive report. A comprehensive report, I think it costs maybe $30. Don't quote me on that. Let me just check I'm going to go check just to make sure. I think it's $25 or $30. And then she has a Patreon account, to support her. She does so much of her work in just not all free, but she does so much of it because, she believes in what she does. And foundmyfitness.com. So amazing. So when you go onto her site, after you've downloaded your raw data from 23andMe or Ancestry.com, I liked 23andMe, it was pretty good. You would put in your email and you'd say, get my report. And you'd put in first, she'll say, go to genetic reports, and you could become a member. You don't have to. And then what you do is you upload it, and then what it is step one is you put the data in. She gives you all the steps. Step one, you upload the data, she goes through it, and then in about 10 minutes, then she sends you the report. Oh, and here it is. The comprehensive report is $25, and then if you want a premium membership for anything to have access to any of her information, it would be $15 a month. Like I said, I'm not sponsored by her in any way. I just feel like she's just a wealth of knowledge, and everyone needs to know her. She's amazing. So from that, I then got a very comprehensive report. It's a 50-page report on what my genes show. And we're going to go over it. It'll take a little while, but what I want you to understand is these letters and the way it snips and the things that come out seem kind of complex. But when you really think about it, we each have the opportunity to change the way our genes are expressed. So let's get to it. So my report is, as she shows, it basically will affect the bioavailability and metabolism of my micronutrients. So with these genes, she's able to see what micronutrients that I may be deficient in. So my genes can even tell you things that I may not be able to metabolize well. Vitamin D, vitamin C, and it will go through a full list. Okay, so my first gene, it's called ADIPOQ. And it's called, the status is, means that I have a low adiponesin level and a higher risk for obesity. This means this gene for me means that I have anti-inflammatory protein, and I have a higher probability of a metabolic syndrome in my blood, and I have a higher probability of obesity. Now that I've just had a baby this past year, I noticed it is harder for me to lower the adipose tissue and to decrease some of that overall metabolism, and it has gotten slower. But what are things that she states here that I can do? Maintenance of weight loss. Researchers have studied that Spanish individuals, which I am of Spanish descent, have a higher triglyceride. Their biomarkers show a little bit of insulin resistance and longevity, that when you have this adipose or ADIPOQ, your longevity is a little less than 95 years. You're less likely to be a centenarian. So what can I do? Now here's that part. So just because this says that I'm going to be heavy or obese does not mean that I am going to be heavy or obese. Now it's the choice of what I put in my body and what I do to exercise and make that choice. So how do I do weight loss and exercise? It's a lifestyle change, right? So then I have to make an active choice to actively do aerobic and weightlifting at least 3 to 5 times a week. And that's even 10 minutes a day. She even states my dietary choices here, that you really want to make sure you have more of a Mediterranean diet, more avocados, more nuts, polysaturated fats, olive oil, and trying to decrease the chance of a type 2 diabetes. My gene TCF F7L2, it gives me an increased risk of type 2 diabetes and polysaturated fat consumption. That's pretty scary, It's saying that I am highly probable of getting type 2 diabetes. And you know what? Why does that have to be the case? Well, that's saying is because although we're thought to be involved in a lipid metabolism, my body does not tend to regulate in this gene, and it's expressed thus decreasing my insulin secretion, and I have an enhanced production of glucose in the liver. So that happens, and that is kind of part of the reason why I'm predisposed to type 2 diabetes, but that does not mean that I will get type 2 diabetes or that I can't manage type 2 diabetes if I get it. So how do I do that again? It is what you put in your body. What you eat and what you have and consume is a direct reflection of what happens. So here again is discussing a Mediterranean diet by the research. The research shows the Mediterranean diet is one of the best resources for cardiovascular risk, and it helps individuals lower their A1C and use of omega-6 and polysaturated fats. So I also have a supplement that I take. I pretty much believe that most individuals need to start taking at least omega-6, like a DHA or EPA. I'll put that in link below, and I take that on a regular. And then I avoid a lot of saturated fats. I really don't do a lot of fried foods. I try to use more poached things, and the only butter that I try to use is just ghee or lactose-free options. I really not much in the oils. You really kind of have to limit that. So my next gene is the MTHFR MTRR. Now, I don't know all these names, but I'm going off of my report and I'm discussing it with you so that it kind of is a little familiar to you and a little familiar to me. So the MTR gene is the code that is enzyme methane synthase reductase. That is what it means, which is a catalyst and conversion of an inactive form, an enzyme. And this basically says it's active by using riboflavin, which is B2, and its cofactor. It is involved in remethylation and homocysteine in the methane and cobalamin B12 participating. So basically it's saying it poses a big role in folate metabolism and methane cycling. This basically says that in my choices of food, I need to eat more eggs, fish, and cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, spinach, very fibrous foods, and things that also have a high B12 and B2 amounts. In addition to that, I have to have a betaine and reduction in homocysteines. One function in choline is it serves as a precursor that is known called betaine or trimethylglycine. Betaine aids in the remethylation of serving as lowering your homocysteine in the blood. Now, multiple studies have shown that when you have 4 to 6 grams per day on the supplementation, it will help your overall cholesterol. In addition, it's saying that I need to increase my B12 and my B2. So for me, what I use is I am very big on B12 and B2. I'll use my green vibrance. I'll do a supplement, and I also use a nutritional yeast to increase my B12. Now, a big thing here too is sometimes you can add in a choline or TMAO supplement. This is what it's stating, and I haven't done that yet, but it says it'll help metabolize better in the gut. I have not done that yet, but I may consider. Now I have the ACE. This is called a slight increased risk for blood pressure and impaired glucose metabolism, high saturated fat diet, and possible lower prevalence of COVID-19. So there's like one good thing in here, but yet not good. So one aspect, it's saying that I have a possible lower prevalence of getting COVID-19, but I still have an increased risk of high blood pressure or impaired glucose metabolism. My goodness, it's like one or the other. I've already been vaccinated for COVID-19, so hopefully in that case I will not contract it, or I will be able to get through that. But on the negative side here, it's saying that I would have an increased risk of high blood pressure. Again, stating that just because my gene states I will have high blood pressure and glucose metabolism does not mean that I won't be able to manage it or never get that to increase. I have had not high blood pressure on the regular, but when I was pregnant, I did have a preeclampsia crisis before the baby was born, and my blood pressures were elevated. So I'm not sure if that was a factor in my genes or just being pregnant. Who knows? But that definitely was some part of my issues. Again, here you want to kind of decrease your overall saturated fats and a lifestyle management. My next one is called FOX03, FOX03, and then there's a bunch of numbers, RS267. Don't have to go into that, but this states that I may have an increased lifespan. Oh, that's kind of cool. So here's something positive. It's basically saying in this protein, it's transcribed in the DNA, and it says that I am associated with longevity. So here's something positive for the day. I get one gene here that says I have an increased lifespan. So I may have some of these other factors, but if I change my overall behavior, I could live longer. The HMG-CR. This is the gene called hydroxymethylglutyl coenzyme. It's HMG-CR, and it encodes the enzyme for cholesterol. Oh my goodness, cholesterol. So it's a statin block that its production. So in this, it shows that in her studies, she stated that around 1,500 patients are associated with reduction of efficacy from pravastatin. What they've been finding is that more and more individuals are not really benefiting from statin drugs, and that it hasn't really helped with lowering cholesterol. So I am one where I would be sensitive to saturated, but I'm also not really benefiting from getting a statin. And that's been shown more and more that statin treatments are not as effective. All right, so my next one is called the ppm1K. And what is that? That is slightly elevated circulation BCAAS and risk for type 2 diabetes in a high-fat diet. Again, another one stating that I'm going to have a high-fat diet and then I'm going to be type 2 diabetes. Wonderful. This biomarker says that I am linked to future diabetes. I need to make sure I keep my pounds underweight, and that I could go into a 10-week weight loss program or choose better options of low sugar and low carbs and Mediterranean diet. My next one is JAK2. This means that I'm twofold increased risk for blood cancer. How interesting. So this says that JAK2 gene controls the number of blood cells produced and survived. The genotype is associated with a twofold increased risk. Cancers of blood, such as leukemia. The increased risk may be due to abnormal damage in the hemopoietic cells, hemotopoietic cells, and that of stem cells, and that goes on to cancer stem cells. Now that is this may never happen. This is a genetic marker. So this is the big thing about when you're reading reports and you're learning about genetics. Just because that marker is there does not mean I'm going to have blood cancer, but it does state that in my genes, that could be triggered on. And how could that be triggered on? There's there's things, stress related, food related, environment could trigger that on, but does not have to mean that it's going to be. There's a whole slew of read about how your leukemia risks. The next one is called the TERC. So TERC is meaning that my telomeres are just slightly shorter. Unfortunately, it's saying that I'm going to have it says I'm going to have a long life, and then it says I'm going to have a shorter telomere life. And that basically is kind of the lifespan of your body with the cardiovascular system and the overall, they call it the telomerase reverse transcription. And bummer, it says it's shorter. But on a good note, they have said that you can reduce this by stress reduction. So I'm a big fan of meditation, exercise, yoga, and using different applications in your life to manage that stress, good and bad stress, but to really manage it. Go outside. Like today's a really beautiful day. I'm going to go outside after this talk. Nutrition, again, here comes nutrition again into this. If I don't change my diet and I don't change what I put into my body, I will demonstrate these decreased telomeres. The next one comes up is called ACYP2. And that's another thing about my shorter telomere lengths. Oh goodness, I still have shorter telomere lengths. The third genetic marker here then states, it's called the OBFC1, says I'm again have shorter telomere length. Genetic marker RTEL1, again stating a shorter telomere marker, but I can still change this marker. I can still work on it. TERC, again, shorter telomere length. I can still work on it. Stress reduction, nutrition, and adequate sleep, not living a sedentary lifestyle, do not smoke, those things, repetitive things that we're learning here, still ways that I can make sure that these markers don't always get triggered. Genetics CYP2R1. I'm risk for vitamin D deficiency. I've actually had this already. I've already had low vitamin D, and I've had to take high doses of vitamin D. Been prescribed like the 50,000 IUs before. I now take a daily vitamin D supplement with my morning shake, so I don't think I'm having trouble with that. But with vitamin D, it's a very big factor in your gut health. It helps with depression. It helps with the overall bone health. It helps overall. There's many markers, but one big thing is that it's associated with lowering your like overall mortality, because it helps with it's just required to achieve like your body's overall wellness. And there's many factors on this, and there's many studies on the genetic components and the need for vitamin D. The next statement is NAF1, and again, it's stating my telomere is a little bit shorter. My goodness, I have short telomeres for sure. The next one is vitamin D binding protein, possible genetic risk for vitamin D deficiency. So I do have a genetic component for having vitamin D deficiency. And has this come up? Like I stated just before, it has come up, and I have had to increase my vitamin D intake. The genetic marker MTHFR, risk for altered folate metabolism and hypohomocysteine. That means that I have a hard time metabolizing B12. So the common MTHFR gene, it's long, so I'm not going to say the full name, but it basically says that folate serves as a precursor in important pathways, the synthesis of the DNA, nucleotide thymine, the generation of the methyl groups, which is very important in epigenetics and also in the conversion of the homocysteine methone, and requires vitamin D as a cofactor. So vitamin B12 as a cofactor. So I have a difficulty with the metabolism of this. So how can I change that, and what can I do to make that better? I would take supplementation. So I would take supplements like 5-methylfolate, B12, riboflavin B2, and I would put that in a diet, or I would put it I have some supplement drinks that I do take, so they do have a good vast amount of things. I don't know if I'm taking 5-methylfolate, but I probably should. Looks like it. And then betaine and reduction of homocysteine. Now this one is it says one of the functions of the choline, again, serves as the precursor known as betaine. Multiple studies have shown that high doses of 4 to 6 grams per day of betaine supplementation can significantly lower your homocysteine concentration. So it's also stating that not only should I take methylfolate, methylcholine, and riboflavin, I also should be taking betaine. SH2B3. So that means I am a slightly risk for celiac disease. I found that interesting. Now I really find myself having a gluten sensitivity. I really noticed that if you ever heard someone say, oh, do you have that like bloated feeling when you eat a lot of bread or eat things that are very, they taste great, but when you eat a lot of bread foods, you feel very sluggish. That definitely is me. So I have recently started going gluten-free and gluten and dairy-free 100%. Well, for the most part, I am dairy-free. Once in a while, I will sprinkle in a couple of a little bit of dairy, but very little. Most of my I have either an almond milk, oat milk, substitutes, and majority of the time I'm gluten and dairy free. And I can see now, looking at this celiac disease, it's an autoimmune condition, and it can be triggered on and off, and this is one of the genes that's expressed. It's called the protein 3. It's SH2B protein 3, and it's involved in the growth factor and the cytokine receptors. So it's like saying that my body is highly probable of being triggered by gluten, which makes sense because I feel like that I have some sort of sensitivity. It might be more of a gluten sensitivity, maybe not directly celiac, but they've even found out that more and more people are gluten sensitive. So my next one is called NPAS2. That means that my circadian associated breast and prostate cancer risks. So I have a possibility of getting breast cancer. I don't know why it says prostate, but I guess maybe it's in the same marker for men or women. Doesn't look like there's only a 10% chance possible, or 3%. So, but you can decrease the inflammation markers and estrogen within the body. The next is AKT1. May increase lifespan. Yay, I have a gene that says, one said my telomere was low, the other one says it's increased. See, there's something good here. The BCMO1 says that I'm 69% reduced conversion of beta carotene into the retinol. So this has to do with my eyes. So retinol is beta carotene in the retinol. It's saying that it's involved in the metabolism of beta carotene in the retinal, which is eye. The provitamin A and provitamin A carotenoids are converted into vitamin A and expressed in the intestinal mucosa in addition to the retinol, combined in the genotypes. In this way is stating that with a 69% reduction in the ability to convert beta carotene into retinol ester in women. Foods that may help with this are organ meat, active form of vitamin A, and supplements of vitamin A. Other options, I guess I can do, I don't know if I eat organ meat, but I guess I can supplement with a vitamin A. And then she has a couple links here. The next one would be SLC23A1. It's saying that I'm a normal risk for Crohn's disease. That means that I am not a person that will get this autoimmune inflammation of Crohn's disease, which is great. I'm glad to know that's one factor, one genetic thing that's not coming up for me. Next is MTHFD1. I have an increased risk of choline deficiency, and I just need to make sure I'm taking a dietary choline intake. So I would make sure that I am taking the right amount of supplements as needed, or folic acid supplements. Dietary intake that I can do is eggs, meat, fish, cruciferous, I say it wrong all the time, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, kale, and again, decrease the betaine, or increase betaine, so I can reduce the homocysteine within the body. FTO. This says that 1 to 3-fold increased obesity and risk for thermogenesis. Now, what this means is that I am at risk for obesity and fat and associated protein. The cluster of these genes together makes me high risk for obesity. How do I change this? Again, it's lifestyle and management. Fish oil, which I take, exercise, physical exercise, and what I put in my body. The next gene is called HS-PAL, P-A-I-L, susceptible to noise-induced hearing loss. Autophagia may help. I'm susceptible to hearing loss from noise. So that means that if I'm surrounded by a large, loud things, that I could actually lose my hearing. That's kind of scary, but it is fixable. Autophagia may play a role in alleviating this. Researchers have studied that autophagia propose that in a noisy environment, oxidate stress products build up the cells in the inner ear and contribute to hearing loss. speculate that the response to stress and the C allele generates a more HSP70, which stimulates the production of the autophagomes and autophagia, which basically means that I will have a better chance of hearing. Now, the study previous to that states that this is just a susceptible. So that means if I was in an environment or worked in an environment that was high noise, or that I actually could lose hearing. Now, that can be, worked on with supplements, hearing, with the proper protective equipment. So here's kind of an environment could affect my hearing. Now, that can change with you wear those, put protective equipment in so that your hearing can be protected. IL-6. This is associated with a longer lifespan and increased risk for certain diseases, though. So it's kind of like a catch-22. I have the gene to say that I have a longer lifespan, but I have an increased risk for certain diseases. Oh, goodness. So what is my certain diseases? Let's see here. So I will live longer, but I have the possibility, not necessarily will, I can live between 90 and 95, but my genetics say that I could still get and develop a cancer or lymphoma or some risk, but not definite. They're just links. That doesn't mean that it's definitely going to happen. My TP53, it may increase my lifespan. Oh, that's another good one. So hopefully my short telomeres, but these genes that say I have an increased lifespan, maybe they'll balance out. So for this one, it states that the study of more than 9,000 Danish older adults carry one or more of the alleles, and they tend to live longer. All right, so my tumor protein 53, TP53, states that I will possibly live longer. I hope it mutates to that. The ACTN3. This means that intermediate fast twitch muscle performance. Intermediate fast twitch muscle performance. That it plays a role in fast twitch skeletal muscle fibers, and it's encoded. The polymorphism is common in general population with approximately 20% of people, and that in spring power activities, fast twitch muscles will do the function optimally. However, muscle fibers appear to be resistant. Oh, that's probably why I was a good track runner. I ran a lot of sports, and I was really good at hurdling and more fast running, like 400, 800s, and so maybe that was a factor in my genetics. AP0A1, slight risk of metabolic syndrome and dyslipidemia and plasma lipids. So what this means is that my body is susceptible to metabolic syndrome and is susceptible to high cholesterol. The genetics is there stating that this will happen, but that doesn't mean that it will definitely happen or will be triggered. What I need to do is be a advocate in my care and make better dietary choices and lifestyle management. TCF7L2. I know this is a long podcast and YouTube, but what I'm really trying to emphasize here and go over is that I don't think people will read their reports all the time. And what you're really trying to get out of these reports is if you do take at least a glance to understand what you may be predisposed to, and then what are the chances or what are the factors and opportunity for you to then use to make your life better, so that maybe these things may not be turned on, these genes. So here again, it's saying type 2 diabetes, what would I have to do? I have to make sure I'm decreasing the sad American diet and making better choices more on the Mediterranean. Like I said, gluten-free, dairy-free, decreasing my carb intake, decreasing my sugar intake, more high quality fats in my food, and just whole foods. I mean, if it has a label, it should have less than like 5 items on it. If it's whole food and it's like Brussels sprouts and carrots, and you can see it and you can taste it, and it's not coming from a package, there's a good chance that it's in a better quality. I mean, of course, I'd love to say everyone's going to get organic, but that may not be in your availability right away. But even if you can just take away some of the carbs and some of the sugar intake, and then increase some of your water, that in itself could help. My CFH genetic marker states that I have an increased lifespan, which is nice, and I have a lower risk for macular degeneration. Well, that's kind of cool. Macular degeneration is a disease presentation it's age-related in the eyes. Actually, I was adopted, but I've had family members that have had that, and it's usually an inflammation marker within the body, and it's an eye condition that usually happens in older adults, and they have a hard time with their vision. APOC3, it says I'll have an increased lifespan. The PEMT is a reduced phosphohydroclean production. What does that mean? It's basically stating that this enzyme, specifically a catalyst in synthesis of choline in the liver, and its components for cell membrane, and plays a role in the structure of the cell. So that's basically saying when my body's making more cells, it has some difficulty due to this decrease of phosphatidylcholine. What this could also mean is that I could have decrease in sleep factors, and that my neurotransmitter called acetylcholine may be a factor in how I sleep. So supplements could be used here. Meditation and stress management can be used in this area. My memory can be decreased, so I would really need to make sure that my cholinergic system and my body's memory deficits, that what I put in my body will also help decrease me from the probability of getting Alzheimer's. It says that I could have a high probability of getting fatty liver disease. And how do I change this? Fatty liver means that there's your liver has a high probability of the bad, very low dense lipoprotein cholesterol. And things that can help with this is choline, which then is found in eggs, meat, fish, and vegetables again. This again comes back to diet, lifestyle management, and if needed, sometimes I could also take a supplement in my diet. The FTO factor is a slight increase in obesity and high protein suitable. So this means that I have a high probability of being obese, but that doesn't mean I will be. It does state, though, I would benefit much from having a high protein diet. So when you're reading something like this, you'd be like, oh, I'm one of those people that would benefit from more protein than carbs. And most people are benefiting more from more protein than carbs. It's just that carbs, sometimes they just taste good. And, you're really going to be mindful of it. It's not an everyday sugar and wheat together. Oh, they are a disaster for diabetes. MTNR1A is a slight increased risk for late onset Alzheimer's. So it says here that there's a possibility that I could get Alzheimer's. Oh, that stinks. But it's basically saying that my melatonin receptor type 1 gene that codes the MT1 melatonin receptor, it's produced primarily in the pineal gland, which the melatonin is primarily produced in the pineal gland, that I have a high risk of, it comes, usually people have a higher melatonin at nighttime, and that if it is decreased, you can get sleep disturbances, and in the long term, some people do have predisposition for late onset of Alzheimer's. That does not mean that it's definite, but you can take associate precautions, finding sleep regimens, supplements, and lifestyle modifications. Gene ADORA2A. This is called the possible sleep disruption with caffeine intake. So this one I can totally understand, and I believe this is a factor for me. I used to not think so because I was in the Navy and I used to be able to drink a ton of coffee. I now have to be more mindful of how much coffee I drink, and this is what I would say for other people. Before you wake up in the morning, you may want to you can have a cup or two, but if you keep drinking 6 to 7 hours prior to bed, this will be a factor in your sleep, and it will disrupt the way you feel, and you can have an increase in wakefulness, but also an increase in anxiety. So really kind of lay low on the coffee. If you're going to have coffee, a big factor would be put in some, it would take getting used to, but I really love, and the body really does need the fats, the good fats, MCT oil, and a little bit of cinnamon and your coffee, or with a 9-dairy creamer, and that will help fuel you for the day, and you don't actually need as many cups. I usually try to stop after 12-ish or so. Doesn't always happen, but I really tell people at the most 2 o'clock to stop. My FGF21, that means that I'm a slight preference for sweets over salty, slight metabolic risk, and dietary suitability. That one I find interesting because I thought I actually liked salty over sweet, but I could be wrong. Again, that could be where they're stating I could have a probability of high sweet intake. They're recommending that I would be suitable for a ketogenic diet, and that ketogenic diet is more on the high fat and low sugar and low carbs. Exercise for me is always recommended, and for anyone, 30 minutes of running or 30 minutes 5 times a week. Cold exposure, I definitely find myself very susceptible to cold. I don't like being in the cold. I like to be warm. FTO, that states that I have a higher probability of obesity and saturated fats. I have to be mindful, again, lifestyle and what I put in my body. The CYP 1A2, faster caffeine metabolism. Again, we're coming back to caffeine. It states that I do metabolize caffeine quickly. I can relate to, again, like I was saying from the military, I drink it, it goes through my body, it doesn't usually affect me, but I do notice that through time that I used to get an excess amount of anxiety, so, and it did associate with how I felt, and I think they say that it even also has an addition to increasing your hypertension risk. So really lower that caffeine intake a slight amount, 1 or 2 grams per day isn't so bad, but when you're having excess amount, it can be a factor. And caffeine would not be the choice when you're trying to exercise. You would like to take other electrolyte and supplements in when you're trying to do an exercise program or performance-based training. My gene FUT2 is slightly lower, meaning that my vitamin B12, which I kind of knew that my B12 had been low. The CD36, decreased ability to taste fat. That's very interesting. I think I taste fat pretty well because I noticed that if I have things that are too oily, I actually find myself not enjoying it, so I'm not sure if I agree with that one. PL1N1, favorable weight loss and improved biomarkers with diet and high in complex carbs. Yay, here's a nice one. Basically stating that if I make lifestyle changes, I work out, I do things that are good for my body, I have a probability of losing weight, which I believe that's a factor. I mean, this last year, I had gained so much weight between the preeclampsia and my weight. I think I was up to 210 pounds. I'm 9 months later, I think I'm down 50 pounds. But it was like, it took a really, well, no, let's see, how much, 40, yeah, 50 pounds. It took me a long time to get, I mean, overall, it wasn't simple, but I'm still working on it. But, it's a process. It's a process. Just don't give up on it. FAD 5-2 or S2, sorry. That means that I have a 27% poorer conversion of my omega-3s. Oh, what a bummer. My omega-3s are not able to process as well, but that does not mean that I don't take the supplement. I still can choose to take the supplement and do okay. Associated, again, I have B12 susceptibility. I actually am susceptible to norovirus, and I have gotten norovirus before. Norovirus is a stomach and intestinal infection. You usually get it with kids. Usually are really big on it's like usually have a lot of either nausea or diarrhea. I worked in pediatrics, so I had definitely one of the little ones had given me that infection. So I've definitely been susceptible to that. So that's happened, and I'm still here. I'm okay. But that one was a tough one. You have a lot of nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And you really have to make sure you have a lot of electrolyte replacement. My MC4R, it's the higher body mass index. Basically, that again is stating a possible affecting dietary suitability. I have a higher body mass index, but again, lifestyle management can change this. My COMT is associated with being nocebo responder. What the heck does that? That I don't know this one. A placebo effect, sometimes called the psychosomatic response. It's a measurable phenomenon that has been subject to the research. The phenomenon occurs that person experiences a positive physiological response to the treatment. Wow. So they're saying that I can do a placebo effect and that it would help me. My body would not know. I think there's probably a lot of people that could do the placebo effect. And what this means is that, you know how a lot of us want to take ibuprofen or pain management pills or a pill to fix something, that if you had the placebo effect and thought you were taking it, or you were in an environment where it was less stressful and you were had less side effects, you actually would do better. The SLC 30AB. This means that I have a slight increase for type 2 diabetes. It also says that I have a zinc transport and susceptibility to DOMS. That means that I have the type 2 diabetes. We discussed that prior. And it says that I have a delayed onset of muscle soreness, meaning that I don't always get sore muscles. That is true. That means that suggests that that I have better healthy muscle function, and that has to do with the beta cells in my pancreas and the skeletal muscles overall, which is good news. And then I'm able to transport zinc well. If this had been not transport zinc well, then I would want to take more of a zinc supplement. OAS1 associated with slightly protective role against SARS. The cool thing about this report that she shows is that she puts in a lot of information on SARS and COVID, so you can kind of see if you were a person that would be a high susceptibility to COVID or high not susceptibility. And for my genetic markers, I'm less susceptible. VEGFA, I'm slightly improved endurance capacity, improved adaption to aerobic exercise, which this means is I would benefit from aerobic exercise and running or jogging and walking. And I believe that's 100% true. The more that I get myself out and doing and moving, I do very, very well. Now, so when I So if you ever come to my office or we speak on a telehealth visit, I'm going to ask you, if we do a full functional consultation, I'm going to ask you to get a 23andMe and a comprehensive report. And I think the total cost of this is, like I said, $25 or $30 for the comprehensive report, and maybe $180 or $199 or $150 for the 23andMe. So that test itself for the genetic report, and that's just to kind of be one of the markers that I would find out all of these different triggers, so that we can kind of work on what's your susceptibility. And like, for example, since I am type 2 diabetes, but aerobic exercise works for me, I need to plan my personalized plan as more aerobic. I need to plan my genetic markers as less carbs, less sugar, because then I am predisposed to these items. So I don't want to trigger that on, or I want to manage it. So in your report, whatever that is for you, we're going to see what's available. So when I look at it, it's not just 50 pages of la 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 letters. It's 50 pages of things that we want to try to improve or look or just be aware of. That doesn't mean everything is going to happen. My G1PR, increased risk for obesity. Goodness, I have a lot of increased risk for obesity. But my next one stated again, I have an increased lifespan. I have AKT1 says I have a slightly increased risk of transient cannabis associated psychosis. Basically, that means it's not in my wheelhouse to have cannabis. So I would not benefit by cannabis use for pain management. Now, that would be the opposite for some patients. Some patients would use cannabis as a need for health care. But for me, it would be bad. ADR-B2, slightly increased endurance capacity, which means, again, that I do well in endurance activities. My FOX03, again, is stating my lifespan. My next one here says, this is very funny. My one friend that we were talking about this says the OR6A, and it's a slight possibility of disliking cilantro. Now, I love cilantro, so I don't think this one is correct. Basically, what it means is that my smell factor, the olfactory receptor, states that when you eat the culinary coriander cilantro, I'm supposedly not liking it because it has more of a soap smell, and that one is not inherited for me. I don't know, that one didn't trigger on. I'm kind of the opposite. I think it's because of my Spanish inheritance, and we always do a lot of cilantro based foods, and like our sofrito has every type of cilantro imaginable in food, so it's like everywhere. Maybe I got used to it. CRY2 means that I have fasting glucose levels altered to a high-fat diet. My BDNF is a greater short-term motor learner, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Basically, I have a short plasticity of motor control, speech recognition, and working memory. Means that I have to really work on my physical activity to make sure that my short-term memory is increased. My SOD2 is a reduced activity and defines as diminished ability to combat stress. Now, here's again another factor of just because my genetic marker here states that I'm not able to combat stress, I've learned tools in my toolbox to alleviate my stress. Meditation, mindfulness, walking, drawing, exercising, being with my family, my animals, numerous things. And I'll go over those things too with you. And I have plenty of resources online and available, or places that you can go to. My CASR is slightly increased serum calcium level. Basically saying that I have a possible lower bone density. So this is a little concerning. I mean, I can increase my calcium intake, but I have to really make sure that I'm regulating it because I don't want to have any osteoporosis late on. It does state, though, that I need to make sure that my calcium intake doesn't make me susceptible to kidney stones or migraines. And my bone health is super important. So I really need to make sure I'm having calcium and K2 supplementation to increase the calcium intake. The FADS1 is associated with intermediate phosphodicholine levels, and that is stating that it's an important role in the structure of the cell. This was stated in another gene, and this is a big factor on trying to state of helping with sleep and the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. So being that I have an intermittent levels, I could have some problems with sleep later on in life, but this can be helped with the supplementation of the choline. It's called choline supplementation or TMAO supplement. And these are things like when we go over these markers or these different things, and I look at your genetic map, that doesn't mean you're going to be taking all of these types of supplements, but if they are part of your personalized lifespan or the plan that we're going over, they may be needed. So this just kind of gives me an idea and gives you an idea so that when you're looking at this, you're not just going, oh, there's just so much information, I don't have time. Well, it doesn't even mean anything. It does. It's so good to be informed. The more informed you are, the better you have. It's pretty much just like having that ammunition and having the available, knowledge base that now you can kind of get the ideas. And then you can have the control. You have the control. The genes don't always control you. The FADS1 is a slightly increased inflammation in the conjunctions of the linic acid or omega-6. So I really do have to make sure that my omega-6s are increased in my diet. My GSSTP1 is a low-dose mixed vitamin E. I would benefit from having vitamin E in my diet. AGT is an increased risk for hypertension and greater responsiveness to lower sodium. Basically, this means that I have a higher probability of hypertension and I would benefit from a low sodium diet. Now, any person would benefit from a low sodium diet in general. And this gene is stating that hypertension, like I had told you, I had preeclampsia in my pregnancy, so I would like to not have hypertension later on in life, so I can try to lower that with diet, lifestyle management. But some people are predisposed to hypertension, and that is some of their genetic markers, but they still can manage it with lifestyle management and weight loss prevention, weight loss strategies. The ACE2, it's a lower tissue expression, and it also is one where it would give you mild disease symptoms of COVID-19. So you might have heard in the news and back when COVID was starting to be learned through studies that when you express the ACE angiotensin converting enzyme and it's expressed in your body, you have a higher probability of getting the COVID. For me, my gene is a lower tissue expression, so the probability of me getting COVID is less for my body. My UCP2 is a slightly increased risk for certain chronic inflammatory conditions. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be inflamed with everything, but that means that what I put in my body means that I have a high probability of getting a increased inflammatory markers. So my mitochondria, that is proteins that are made up, gives me that I am susceptible to more inflammatory diseases like a rheumatoid arthritis, a chronic fatigue syndrome, and overall inflammation. And I can tell you from my personal experience and my personal life that through the years of my traumas and through life, that I know by my diet change has been a factor in my less pain. So what I put in my body can decrease the chances of me having or kind of turning on RA, possibility of a lupus, or possibility of any other type of like chronic fatigue. The LPA is a lipoprotein level. I'm actually not at risk for coronary artery disease from this genetic component, but that doesn't mean I couldn't be. Now, it's another thing here where you're stating to yourself, if I eat a crappy, sad diet, then I can still be predisposed to coronary artery disease. But if I keep with the right things, then I won't be. My IL-18 states that I have a slightly increased viral load, but I'm overall not as susceptible to COVID. My LO17A, it states that I can get acute respiratory distress syndrome, but it says I have a reduced chance of getting SARS. Again, I have, this one's kind of funny because it's like a little negative, positive. This one says ABO associated with increased risk for severe COVID. So these are kind of like these markers. One says I'll get it. The other one says I won't get it. That's a little, interesting there. Not as exciting. This one's I can definitely tell you this is my thing. MCM6 says lactose tolerance. I have problems with my lactase, and I have a problem with having it. When I eat milk, I notice that for me, I do a dairy alternative because I have a problem with metabolizing lactose. I have these other ones are stating that majority are normal, which are great. So it says these are less worthy kind of genetics, meaning my iron is normal. Just kind of go quickly through these last parts because it can be a lot. As long as I'm taking my vitamin D, overall I should be having a better cholesterol. It does say that I'll have a normal telomere length. So there's been a couple things that said yes and no, but it definitely is environment, stress, nutrition are factors. I don't do well with statins. Be mindful of how much triglycerides and cholesterol consumption, the LDL cholesterol specifically. I do require 8 hours of sleep, which I can tell you, I love 8 hours of sleep. If you bother me, and especially being a new mom, I love my little one. But when I wasn't getting sleep those first few months, let me tell you, I was not a happy camper. I found every way possible to try to fit sleep in, because when I got less than 6 hours, it was hard. And my body really loves to get its adequate amount of sleep, and most people should. They should get between 7 to 9 hours at least, and with a little small nap or at least a rest in between. And then majority of my other markers were fairly normal, so I'm not going to go over every single one there. I just kind of wanted to kind of touch base and look into these to kind of say this is kind of what is in my genetics and what I had to look for and predisposed to, and that maybe just because these things come up, that doesn't mean that I will have them, but I have to learn to manage them, to be aware of it, and to make better choices every single day. So every single day I have to make an active choice, and it's true. Every single day I have to think about what I put in my body. I drink water. I drink more water. I'm not a drinker by very little. I would say maybe every 2 weeks I'll have a glass or one or two. I'm not a big drinker anymore. I think when I was younger in my 20s, maybe it was fun. So I'm mindful about that. Food, every single day I have to think about what I put in my body. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult than others, but it's a habit, it's a mindset, it's a different way of thinking. So I hope today, I know this is a long podcast, YouTube, and research, but I will put in the show notes where the website that I went to get your own genetic report. And it's awesome. So, and then pretty much that would be one area that I would look over when you would come and see me as a patient for a functional health consultation. I hope you enjoyed some of this and you got a little bit of value out of it. And if you did, subscribe or comment below, and I'd love to hear more from you. You have a wonderful day, and wherever you are, thanks. Bye.